Hello, everybody, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, and I am joined today by a first-timer making their debut on the show, who I also had the privilege of meeting at this past year's Anacon at the Anaheim Library. Now, my guest today got his start in comics as an editor and writer on the Eisner and Harvey award-winning Popgun anthologies for Image. He also had worked published by IDW, the Amelia Cole series, The Bigger Bang, and The Biggest Bang, and Dark Horse, The Once and Future Queen, Errand Boys, and Never Ending. His latest comic is Laser Joan and the Rayguns, a collection of rock and roll spy adventures that originally appeared in the award-winning Dark Horse Presents. And he is also the creator of this amazing comic, which I just mentioned not too long ago, which I had to buy at Anacon, and I'm so excited to talk about this and more. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, comic and creative DJ Kirkbride. DJ, welcome to the show.
Hello, Gabriel. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, DJ. So excited to have you here. Now, before we dive into your background as a comic and a fellow creative, is there a random fact about you that not a lot of people know?
Oh boy. I mean, I'm sure there are tons of facts people don't know about me. I have two cats named Nina and Susie, both named after rock and roll ladies.
Nice. Very, very nice. I cannot tell you how many times pets have been mentioned on the show. They're either in the background or, in the case of cats, they're normally walking across the screen. I cannot tell you, DJ, how many times Wandering Scribe pets have appeared on the show.
That doesn't surprise me. Nina just walked out of the office, but she might be back. You never know.
Awesome. So, without spoiling too much of your work as little teasers, what can you tell our viewers and listeners about some of the incredible works you've been a part of over the years?
Well, I mean, I love comics as my chosen favorite medium to work in. I often work with a gentleman named Adam P. Nave. We co-write a lot. And all of our work, we tend to infuse a little humor in it, no matter how dark it gets. I think humor is kind of an important medicine to a story.
Mm-hmm.
And even in these times where it's getting harder and harder for me personally, I think in a lot of us to have hope, I think all of my stories and all of our stories have a little bit of hope in them. I think that's something if you're, we're not going to write you a complete downer, no matter what.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And since I have this incredible piece right here, what can you tell our viewers about the Once and Future Queen?
That was a really fun miniseries, and that was you have the collection there that Adam and I co-wrote for Dark Horse Comics published. The artist is a gentleman named Nick Brokenshire, who we did our first ongoing series, Amelia Cole, with. So he's a great collaborator that I hope I can work with again. And he did the art and colors for that book. And Frank Svetkovic did the letters and the logo design, and we always try to work with him. And The Once and Future Queen was kind of a modern reimagining of the Arthurian legend about a young chess prodigy in modern-day Portland who discovers she's the true wielder of Excalibur. And so we kind of had fun playing fast and loose with the legend, like not really being beholden to things, but certainly Adam and Nick are kind of experts. They know a lot about Arthurian legend, and I'm more of a layman, like I know the broad strokes. And so we had fun with that. We wanted to have adventure. There's romance, there's comedy, a lot of drama and twists and turns, and that was a really fun book to do. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. So let's now go back in time a little bit to talk about your origin story. And let's start, where did you really get invested in comics, so to speak? What would you say was your aha moment, so to speak?
It's interesting. Sometimes I think as a kid growing up in the 80s, I think I saw a lot of reruns of shows like Super Friends before school. So we saw like the old superheroes and stuff. And I think those really excited me But my earliest memory is watching Superman the movie starring Christopher Reeve on like ABC television on Sunday nights. This is before VCRs, and back then they'd kind of show the movies. Sometimes they make it a 2-night event, like a long movie like that. They'd actually add deleted scenes and stuff, and that really got me excited. And so that and the cartoons, and then discovering comics, and then finding out that my dad collected comics when he was a kid, and he was a Marvel kid. He loved Daredevil and Thor and the original like early Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko comics. So I think that was a big part of it. I think that, you know, finding it in mainstream media, and then learning about my dad's connection to it, and then finding these books at like, and also back then they were at like grocery stores, like everywhere you went, they were on spinner
Oh
racks,
yeah.
like 75 cents. I remember when they were raised to $1. I'm like, whoa, okay, it's so expensive. Um,
Oh yeah, that's true. Even
but
I
I got,
remember that.
yeah, oh yeah, and I got hooked on them, and I loved them, and I would read them randomly, and then started, you know, as a teenager was collecting them, and now even in my middle age, I still enjoy them. I think it's a really fun storytelling medium.
Absolutely, 100%. So, kind of fast forwarding a little bit, according to your bio, you also began your professional work in comics by working as an editor. Can you walk us through that process and what did you learn about that aspect of the industry?
Yeah, it was funny. To back up a little, I was working for a humor magazine years and years ago called Taste Like Chicken. It was kind of like an Onion style humor magazine. They had a cool comic section, and so there are some comic creators who were working on that. And I came on board as a writer, and then I helped edit some of their their story sections. And so I had a little experience in editing. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I met some people, and one of them was this guy Mark Smith, and then later Joe Keating. They were doing this book called Popgun, and I think it was just kind of at first Mark maybe was sending me stories, and they'd send me scripts, and I just, at the time I had undiagnosed OCD that's now been diagnosed, but like I just, whenever I read something, if I saw like a little error or you know, just wanted to make an edit, I just would do it and send it back, and like, you can listen to this or not, but you know, some grammar corrections. And I think they started thinking, hey, he can do the kind of boring stuff that we don't want to do. So I started as an assistant editor on the first Popgun, and just would help them with organization and going through and, you know, just helping edit the copy edit for the most part, the stories. And then that grew to becoming a kind of full-fledged co-editor with volume 3 and then also volume 4. In the volume 4, my friend Adam and another guy named Anthony Wu, they joined us as editors on volume 4. And actually, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about finding people, meeting people in comics. It was really exciting when I'm looking back at it, because I was young and I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was talking to creators that I was a fan of when I was growing up, like Eric Larson was involved, and I grew up on his Spider-Man and then Savage Dragon and stuff like that. So I learned a lot. I wish I knew more when I was doing it, because those were big books, and
Right.
and I probably made, and I know I made a lot of mistakes, but it was a fun kind of trial by fire. And they ended up, you know, I met a lot of good people that, you know, I'm friends with to this day. Like that book Never Ending that you mentioned, the artist Robert Love, I met on Popgun, and The Bigger and Biggest Bang of Vasily Gogtsilis, he was on Popgun, you know, and doing different things, and knew me as an editor, and then we worked together creatively. So those books, you know, they're kind of the gift that keeps on giving. Although it is
Absolutely.
interesting that they were big award winners, and that was like right at the start of my career. So it's, instead of building up, it's like boom, and now it's, you know, it was a weird way to start, but I got to learn a lot. My primary focus is writing, but I know I can edit thanks to those books.
All right. All right. Now, again, moving ahead in your career, when you got around to making your own works with your own characters, with your own team of fellow writers and artists, what ultimately was the goal you had in mind for each project? And ultimately, what was the promise you're making to not just yourself and your team, but also the audience?
Let's see. I mean, with Popgun, I did get to do a little writing. I do like a story or two in each volume, and that was really fun. And also, that's when I started collaborating with Adam. And I think, so let me try to process, make sure I answer the question. To the team, especially back then, it was all about just creating our own stories. I wanted the team to be invested. I wanted us all to be invested in it. So it wasn't just like, I didn't have any money anyway, so I wasn't like hiring artists. Instead, it was like, let's co-create something. Like, either here's an idea, do you like it, or what do you like to draw, and we'll figure out something that we can write that maybe they'll enjoy drawing, and in the end, we'll own it all. And if it becomes something or whatever, we'll split the money. Which, sometimes there is no money, and if there is, there's often very little. But at the same time, we're all owners. So the promise there was, I just wanted us to all do work that we enjoyed. Usually we were all starting out at the same time, or kind of getting our starts together. But yeah, I wanted there to be fun, and something that we were all in it together, like a real team aspect, kind of, and then for the audience, I mean, I think primarily I want to entertain with everything, but, and this sounds kind of silly when I'm doing like Arthurian legend, or like giant space opera, or Star Wars-esque sci-fi, or rock and roll spies, but there's always something, whenever I write something personal in there, that people can also get out of it if they choose, or if they see it, or if they relate to it. I like the idea of fiction, even if it's fantasy or science fiction or adventure or comedy, telling personal stories, something that people can latch on to if they choose.
Absolutely. Well said, DJ. Well said.
I hope so. I don't know. I felt like a word salad. Thanks.
Oh, no, that was perfect. That was well said, DJ. Absolutely well said. So now let's dive into our first round of fan questions. One of my viewers would like to know, among the stories that you have been a part of and helped create it, either the writing aspect or actually help with the brainstorming of said characters, who is your favorite, and which one was probably the most intense to create, either to build a backstory or to conceptualize?
Well, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to pick the favorites, right? That's like, a parent to pick their favorite kid, and they always claim they don't have a favorite, but they do. But I'd say in a way, my favorite is the first ongoing series that I did. I co-wrote with Adam, that Nick Brokenshire drew, and then Reese Moreno did some coloring assists on, and Rachel Deering lettered. And then later we did a collection that Dylan Todd designed for IDW. It's called Amelia Cole. It was a 30-issue series. We started it, originally it was digital with Monkey Brain Comics, which is they were a great group, and they did some cool stuff. It was fun to be a part of that. And then IDW ended up putting out the print editions, and that was fun because Amelia, we said she was kind of like a mix of like Doctor Who and Alice in Wonderland. It was like fantasy and adventure. She fought crime with a magic pipe wrench, which actually one of our little things that Adam had a friend of his make was this pipe wrench replica. So we have Amelia's magic pipe wrench. And she was just such a fun character, because it was kind of like, instead of having some tragic origin story, like Uncle Ben, like with Spider-Man, was murdered, or Batman's parents are murdered, or Krypton explodes. For her story was, she was in a world where everybody can do magic, but people would do it for mundane things. And she's like, if I have this power to help, I want to help. And that escalates to becoming like stopping like purse snatchers, to like helping people who need like their housing fixed, to saving the universe and multiverse and everything by the end of the series. And so it was about escalation, like how doing the right thing can be very difficult, and sometimes get you into a lot of some big pickles and a lot of trouble, but you still want to do it. So she was a really fun character to write, and she was an aspirational character. Like she'd run towards trouble to help, whereas I might like kind of cower and not want to, get into the mix. So it was kind of like writing a character that I wish I was a little more like. And then probably the most difficult in a way was this book I did called Errand Boys, that I wrote, and an artist named Nikos Koitsis drew, and Frank lettered. And originally Image put out the 5 single issues, and then Dark Horse put out the collection. And it's about 2 half brothers, and they have the same dad and different moms, and kind of grew up totally different lifestyles and don't really know each other. And through like some tragedy, they kind of become a family. And so that story was difficult because it's like a big action-packed sci-fi adventure. I actually have a copy of it here, so you can see it's like a really
I remember that
artwork. Yeah, this is one of the books I still have copies of. So it's like a big space opera, and you can read it just as like sci-fi adventure and comedy. But for me, there's a lot of personal stuff that I peppered in there, and that was kind of, and it did end up being pretty difficult to write. But once I got through it, I was really happy with the results. Even though everything I do, I would change a lot if I could had a time machine. But it's a book that I'm pretty proud of, because if you tap into it, there's a lot there, a lot of so yeah, that was definitely the most difficult to do, because I think it was the most kind of personal in a weird way. Even though it has big monsters, I've never met a big monster. I've been to outer space.
All right, I like it. I like it. And so ultimately, DJ, when you began, creating these incredible works, like of course the ones from Future Queen and Errand Boys and many more, when did you feel confident in your ability to say that you are a comic writer? And the reason I bring that up is there always seems to be like, imposter syndrome and writer's block that always seems to stop us. And even if those two are not the main reasons, the one thing I have found, which is interesting, whereas if we are like indie writers or indie comic writers, there's always unfortunately that stigmatism still, where if you're independently published or you create your own works independently, you're not seen as, legitimate in the sense. I've had a lot of people on the show who have talked about this. I've had authors, I've had some comic writers on the show, which is unfortunate because the indie market for comics is like, booming. You have like, even though they're not indie, they're definitely the two biggest ones. Like, Imagine, you have Dark Horse, you have Vertigo, you have so many others. And yet there are always still people who believe that independent or small press comics or independent comic writers don't have the same gumption, for lack of better words, as those tied with Marvel Comics or DC Comics. So for you, DJ, when did you feel confident in your abilities to tell people, say like, yeah, I am this because I create these stories. I have a team that I work with, a very good team. When did you feel confident in your abilities to say that?
Honestly, I still struggle with it. I mean, it's still, in a way, it's almost harder. I've had since the pandemic and lockdown, it somehow something happened. It's felt harder for me to get published. So I still think about that. And there's a part of me that still ties this all to, do I make a living doing this? And I don't at all. Like I need, a day job. So for me personally, sometimes I have trouble saying I'm a writer, even though that is what I am. And I do other things to pay the bills. I do what I have to. I'm also an adult in the world, and you do what you have to do. And I have a wife and, my kitty cats, and try to help take care of everybody and pull my weight. But I don't do that with other people. Like if I meet someone who's just created a book, I'm like, you're a creator, you've done it, boom, done. So I'm kind of a hypocrite in that sense. Like I have different, I just look at it for myself differently for some reason, something I'm working on. But in terms of the indie versus Marvel and DC, I grew up in Marvel and DC. I still like love a lot of those characters, and I like the movies, and I like the TV shows, and I like a lot of the comics that come out. But I also kind of really started getting into comics during the Image boom, and then that led to like me learning about a lot of those mainstream creators from Marvel mostly like went and created their own things, and I started seeing other independent books and discovered people like Mike Allred, who has this great character called Madman that kind of kept me in comics at a point in my teens where I was kind of thought I was growing out of them, and then I read one of those and I was like, oh, okay, this is the best thing, I love it. So I never had that thought that Marvel and DC were the big time. I mean, they're bigger, but I also was really into independent movies too in the 90s, like Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith and a bunch of other people. So there's a part of me in indie rock too, like so there's a part of me that like I always liked the indie stuff. So like I love reading a lot of those books, and Superman's probably my favorite fictional character ever, just for a ton of reasons, but it's never been my goal to write Superman. I almost don't want to see how the sausage is made. I want to be able to enjoy it from the outside. So in terms of the indie stuff, I really applaud indie work. And I do like having a publisher, but I actually did my first kick. We did our first Kickstarter, and it was a reprint of some stuff that was in Dark Horse Presents. You mentioned it, the Laser Joan and the Rayguns. And this is the first time we kind of, we collected stuff that has already been done, but it's the first time self-publishing. And I used to be really worried about that. But I have a lot of friends who self-publish, who make great stuff and do their passion projects. And I started years ago getting more and more into the idea of controlling everything, you do that as much as possible. And I have a friend named Douglas Gautier who does zines and makes toys, and he's introduced me to a lot of zine fests, and I found a lot of joy going there. So it's interesting. The older I get, like I'm starting to look into usually people start in self-publishing and then get to publishers. I did the opposite where I worked with publishers. Now I'm really curious about self-publishing. And so that's a long-winded, probably scattershot answer. But the truth is I still sometimes have trouble saying I'm a writer, but I do love to write. And no matter what, I'm going to create something, whether people read it or not. So I think, but that is something I still struggle with. But yeah, I'm a writer. I like to write.
Nice. Absolutely, DJ.
I don't know if I answered your question.
No, you did. You absolutely did. And now this is probably one of my other favorite fan questions is, of course, routine and schedule. Because for all us creatives, our routines and schedules greatly change when we go into this journey. For me as an indie author, I am now a night owl. I wasn't a night owl before, but I typically write in the evening because I work most of the day. And around I want to say towards 9 or 10 o'clock, that's when I just spend the next 2 to 3 hours just writing. And it's definitely changed my schedule, to say the least. So I was wondering, DJ, you could tell us a little bit about your schedule of how you go about, making the characters, outlining the story, and stuff like that.
It is always different. In terms of schedule, I've never been that good at keeping a schedule for writing, and I think that's hindered me. You saying you're a night owl. I don't know. I like the idea of I wake up at this time and I write these many pages, or I start plotting and then I take a break, and I love that. And I wish I had the discipline to do that. And maybe someday I will. I'm pretty old. I'm getting older. I don't know if I'm going to ever develop that skill. For me, often, and I know you write novels, right? You write historical fiction and stuff. So it's more of a solo thing. Whereas I think part of what I like about comics is I'm accountable to my team. So if I'm co-writing with Adam, I don't want to make him wait for me. If we're past, sometimes we'll kind of do a phone call where we'll plot together, and then maybe I'll take a pass on the breakdown of the first few pages and then send it to him, and he'll flesh it out and then do the breakdown of the next, or we'll flip it. And I never want to leave him waiting. So that kind of makes me have a schedule. That makes me have a deadline, self-imposed deadlines usually. Or if the artist is waiting for, I don't want the artist to have to wait for pages. Or I used to have a bad habit of seeing a lettered page after Frank had done the letters and had been drawn, and realizing, oh, there's maybe a typo, or I want to move this or that. And that's so much work. That's unfair. So I want to make sure that we have everything written and ready to go for the next person to take it over, for the artist or the letter or colorist. And so I think for me, having a team makes me have a schedule, even though it's not necessarily a certain time of day, but it's deadline based.
Absolutely. And that's actually I want to talk with you a little bit about, DJ, as it's a semi-fan question, but it's also more of I call the business side of being a creative. And that's, of course, working on a team for comics. Now, I've had a lot of authors who have been on the show who have co-authored books, but I've never really had a discussion on, what really goes into, making a comic, because it is a team effort, because you have to make sure your end is finished before you pass it on to the next person. It has to be very, very seamless. As you mentioned just now, you don't want to keep the other person waiting. You want to make sure that when they get the next stage of the project, they're able to do their work, whether they are the line editor or the colorist or whatever that person may be in the team. It's a seamless transition. So I wonder if you can just share a little bit of wisdom for those who may want to go into the indie comic route or may want to make their own comics. What should they do? What is your word of wisdom?
Oh, geez. I mean, let's see. I think in terms of, that's a toughie. I mean, because there's, to me, there are two distinct ways to basically making a comic. Like if you can write and draw, to me, like pure cartooning, that's the ideal. To me, like the hold up people who can do that. Like a Jack Kirby
Oh
or
yeah.
Michael Allred, or I mean some um, uh, Michel Fife. I might be mispronouncing his name. He does these great books where he self-publishes and he writes and he draws and he colors and he letters, like he does it all. And uh, um, that's a little that way of creating is different than what I do, where I'm working with creators and have more of a team. But even then, often they work with letters or colorists, so there's still a team in comics. Um, Gosh, I'm sorry. So your question, what exactly was your question?
Of
I
course.
started thinking
Yeah, of
about cool
course.
comics.
So ultimately, for someone who wants to make their own comics, and let's say they have a good, decent team, let's say they have an artist, they themselves may have a writer or maybe a co-writer with them, and maybe an editor. What are some of, like, we would say, like the ground rules of making a good comic?
Okay. Well, I think one thing is if you have a story that you like and that your team likes, it's important to trust that other people will too. I think we can talk ourselves out of that, like be like, no one's going to be into this, or this is, or maybe like someone's done something similar to this, and that happens a lot. Like a lot of stories have been told, but if you love it and you and your team are into it, someone else is going to be, and you're going to bring your own spin on it, so it's still worth doing. I think one of the most important things, and it sounds cheesy, but is to enjoy it, because odds are there's not going to be money in it, or
Mm-hmm.
like sometimes, like with Laser Joan, we did a Kickstarter, and our goal was to not lose money. Like at the very least, let's not lose money. Let's just like have it pay for itself, and then the people who want it can get it. And it ended up doing that. So, but ultimately the goal is let's make something cool that we all like. I think that's really important, because if you base everything on money, that you can be disappointed. And I have been, and I am sometimes. Like I wish I made a living doing this, but the idea of let's like put on a show, kind of, like let's all tell a story, let's do something we all enjoy, I think is very important. And then it's about working with your team, being flexible. I think as a writer, especially because you're kind of at the bottom floor of unlike a novel where it's your words tell the whole story, and that's amazing. And Adam writes novels, and I read novels, but I don't know that I could ever write one. I've written short stories, but in a comic, you're just the ground floor. So that script, once it gets to the artist, they take over kind of, and it's something different. And then some artists will follow the script exactly. Some artists will just change things, and then you once you get the pages back, either you go, whoa, 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 what was this? Or it sparks something, and you can be flexible with your story and go, okay, well, I'm going to arrange the story a little, or arrange the word balloons, or cut some dialogue here, cut a caption here. It's not necessary. I think that flexibility, specifically for a comic writer, is super important. But the main thing is just to always try to be in communication with your team, and let them know that that there is flexibility. Also, every artist is different. Every story is different, so it's being aware of different changing dynamics, I think, is important. But the bottom line is you got to have fun. Like honestly, like even when it's tough, like in the end, I just sound so cheesy, but I think it's important to have joy when you're doing the work, because I think that comes across to the readers.
Absolutely, 100%. And I've even contemplated actually working with a local comic writer in my area who is actually incredible. I've actually got a chance to meet him again at Anaconda. Shout out to Sebastian of Turbo Fox. He's an incredible cartoonist and writer as well. And I've actually thought about working with him to adapt one of my books in comic form, whether in a limited series run or making like a graphic novel in and of a sense. It's a lot of work to definitely consider. And again, when we talk about, the business side of, being a creative, it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. And as you mentioned before, there is no guarantee in this industry that you're going to make a lot of money. But I think if you understand that, but still approach it in the sense of, you're passionate about the industry, you're going to be very fine. Because I've had a lot of people mention on the show, they've had friends and colleagues who try to get into this industry, whether you're an author or a comic writer or a comic artist, trying to make money from the onset. And the burnout was immediate. In like less than 6 months to a year, they lost their passion for writing or drawing, which is sad and very, very unfortunate, but it does sometimes happen. And that also kind of leads into, as you also talked about just now, collaboration and, building a team. What I've seen very frequently is a lot of people on social media networking and collaborating and building teams from there, which the indie community on Instagram, for example, is huge. There is a lot. And social media as a creative is like a must. And it's absolutely insane not to have one, even though I have talked with a lot of people who are not tech savvy or social media savvy. I myself, definitely one of those. Instagram's my only one. But the question I'm leading to is, what does it mean to be a creative in the digital? How far the industry has changed over the last 20 years with likes, shares, and follows. And that all plays into our imposter syndrome and writer's block. And it can be overwhelming at some times. So, DJ, ultimately, my question to you is this. By being a creative in the digital age and seeing how the industry has changed over the decades, what has still disciplined you to not forego the morals that you set out for yourself as a comics writer and still maintain that same passion you had when you started this journey?
I don't know. I was gonna say I'm just madness. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, part of what's the digital and social media aspect of everything. I mean, I've been on both. I've kind of been of two minds about it. I mean, I used to be on everything and was on like Facebook and Twitter back when it was Twitter and Instagram, and I kind of and I met a lot of people digitally, like with Popgun. There's a site called Deviant Art, and I think it's still around, but we used to find a lot of artists that way. I met a lot of people that way, and I think it's a great tool. But I do, like with everything, there are negatives to it, and I got burnt out on it. Like I actually ended up backing off. I quit Twitter, don't want to be on X, and I quit all the meta platforms too. But I then rejoined Blue Sky, which was kind of like a lot of creators moved to that. It's kind of like similar to Twitter, but a little more maybe creative friendly and less algorithm heavy. So
Right.
There's something to that. It was interesting. And then we did the whole Kickstarter for Laser Joan. I didn't have Facebook or Instagram or anything, and it was kind of crazy. I mean, my collaborators did, and my wife would be nice enough to post on her Instagram sometimes and whatnot. But trying to get the word out, it is important. And you're right, like, and more, everybody tells me, like, you got to be on Instagram. So I actually just rejoined Instagram like last week, just to be like, I'm just going to rejoin it, and I'm going to kind of start over and make it more just about comics, not about like personal life or anything. I just want to like find creators and fans and let them know when I'm doing something new. And if I do another Kickstarter, that'll be an avenue to get the word out. So I think it can be a great tool, but like you said, it can also, there's a danger to it sometimes, like worrying too much about likes, worrying too much about how many follows you have. Sometimes people can be really rude online, because we're not face to face. Whereas if you meet someone in person, it's very different. So personally, like I being part of the digital age, it's really helped in that I get to, even just something as basic as email. Like I work with creators all over the world that I wouldn't have been able to do before the internet.
Right.
Artists in the UK, artists in Greece, or even just an artist in Northern California, which is pretty far away from where I am in Southern California. But I still really I like the tangible physical aspect and going out and meeting people, and just like of comics and creation in general. And I think people are kind of moving towards that more and more, it seems like. Like at Anacon, where I met you.
Oh yes.
There it was pretty joyful being there and being in a library, a really nice library, the beautiful library. The Anaheim Public Library is so nice. They so well curated, and the con was so well run. Um, so as much of a great tool as digital is, there's still, to me, nothing better than having a physical book and meeting people and flipping through people's books and chatting with people and fist bumping and everything like that. But being a creator in this age, it is important to have an online presence to get your word out. I've noticed a lot of creators using newsletters more and more too, which is something I might look into. Just a lot of direct to consumer, I guess, direct to reader stuff we can adapt for the digital age, I think. I'm behind though. I mean, like that's the thing. I'm thinking of adapting to something that everybody's been doing for like 10 years already, you know. But there, I don't know, pluses and minuses to it for sure.
That is true. That is very, very true, DJ. And of course, let's talk about the big elephant in the room, which is, of course, generative AI trickling its way into the industry. Now, in like the world of like authors and indie books, that is unfortunately a new reality. We have generative books that are being sold at bookstores, and it, in a way, damages, as I've heard from a lot of people say, the art of storytelling, because it's not really the author's voice, it's a program's voice, and you're just the programmer. And I've also seen the same thing happen in the comics world, where you have people generate comic panels and sell them. And there's one argument I was seeing, and this is kind of, I don't say recent, but maybe a few months ago, where the latest Batman comics, I believe a few issues past, were accused of using generative AI because the artwork did not look as if it was made by a person. There was a lot of weird technical issues, not technical issues, but weird coloring issues or drawings that didn't seem right. It was very interesting. Don't know the truth whether or not it was generative or not, but that is unfortunately our new reality. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on, generative AI, unfortunately making its way into the creative sphere.
Well, I hadn't heard that about the Batman. That I don't want to get on my soapbox too much, but I think that humans, if we contribute anything to the world, because the world would be fine without humans. Animals would live here and there wouldn't be pollution. It wouldn't be on the brink of destruction like it is because of humans, right? Like there's something about us. We build, and consume more than we need to. And I think the one thing that we do is create. We can tell stories, we make art, whether, hand-drawn, music, film, comics, writing. And so I think that human element is absolutely necessary to creating art. Generative AI is not art.
Yes.
And it breaks my heart when I see it. It upsets me when I hear creators that I respect using it. And also just the environmental impact of it. Like I'm not an expert, but hearing about data centers and the results and the destructive impact of those, all of it leads to me to think we don't need it. I don't know why it's being shoved down our throats. I'm surprised when creators I respect talk it up. So me personally, I think art's like the one thing that humans do.
Absolutely.
So maybe we could just keep it for us. I don't understand why in the world we would want to take that away and give that to a machine that's not creating that. Man, I get, like, we are all inspired by things, obviously, and sometimes we rip off of things or accidentally do things that someone else already did. But still, there's that, like I said before, like there's that personal aspect. If you're telling a story, it's like from your point of view, not from a grab bag of a bunch of other people's stories and works. And I think it's thievery, and I'm really saddened by it. And I'm one of the people hoping the bubble bursts, because I think there are a lot of creative people out of work. I mean, because of it. A lot of industries being negatively impacted, and I'm having trouble seeing a plus side to it. That's my take.
You're absolutely right, DJ. And for me, as an author, I've always said, we can't always say we can't be like against AI because, spell check and everything is in a sense AI. But if we're talking about, as generative AI and making, absolutely not. It should not be used whatsoever. I've even heard people say that you shouldn't even use it for brainstorming. You should think of an idea that you have and jot it down. Even if it's not coherent, it's still your idea. And that's why I've always said, if I ever had a chance to work with fellow creatives, whether that's artists or narrators especially, I'm going to do it. I'm going to work with them because we're all in the same boat together. And in the creative industry, probably one of our biggest strengths is fostering a sense of community, our tribe, our family. And that's an amazing, amazing thing. Now, kind of going into now sort of like the business side again, I am very keen to hear your insight onto this particular question, which is the balancing of the market and the audience. And let's use the once and future queen as an example. Now, as you mentioned, this is, another retelling of the Arthurian legend. And, people who may not be as well knowledgeable on the Arthurian legend know of, Excalibur, King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, and so forth. And when retelling the story in one's own style, it's this balancing act of, okay, we have to be mindful of people, the audience in the genre that we are writing to, because they have certain expectations of how that type of story is supposed to go. On the other side, we want to showcase our individuality, our uniqueness. And from the Once and Future Queen, I actually almost finished reading this. And I just got to say, I don't want to spoil anything, viewers and listeners, but this is a darn good book. You definitely need to read this. The artwork itself is incredible, which we'll be talking about a little bit later. So, DJ, I was wondering if you can tell us sort of that balancing act that creatives have to deal with, especially comic writers and artists who are part of a team who are trying to, make something good, make something unique, but always thinking of the market, even if they don't want to.
I mean, I sometimes wonder if I don't think about the market enough, to be honest, because especially once it becomes, I know that I need a job regardless of what comics I do, then I just want to do what I want to do, right? But you do want people to read it. And certainly like that came out from Dark Horse, and I honestly think it should have done better than it did. I honestly think we should be on like volume 2 or 3 of the Once and Future Queen. And there's like a lot of, it could be attributed to marketing and just the market in general. I still have a lot of people discovering that book as if it's brand new. Every time I go to a convention, I can see that this is something people enjoy. I wish we could have done more. For that, there was a thought. We're trying to think about what to do next. So that was our follow up. Adam and I were trying to work with Nick again after 30 issues of Amelia Cole, and like what is something that might appeal to him and also to an audience and also maybe a publisher. And I think part of the reason we chose Arthurian legend is because Nick's from the UK, and and he is a King Arthur, an Arthurian legend fan, and so there was a calculation there, and it wasn't. But it would also be like, okay, it's also a marketable title and kind of something people know. But for us, it was kind of also just trying to see if our friend and this awesome artist would want to work on it with us. But I honestly, I'm not super good at intellectualizing these things. And after we did that, some other book came out that lasted. I might still be going on, called Once and Future. That and so there's all this stuff. If you kind of work on a story that is a retelling or reimagining, there's a chance that someone else is doing it too, and your versions are going to be very different. But in the end, I think it's just about again, it's very simplistic of me to say, but it's about doing something that you enjoy and trusting that if people find it, they'll enjoy it too. And with Once and Future Queen specifically, we knew enough about the stories, like adapt and take some bits of it and discard others, or maybe make it a story point that this is what you thought, but this is in this story, this is what it really was. And we had ideas for future ones too, where we're going to bring in other aspects like the lady in the lake and all of that we don't get to in the Once and Future Queen. But yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to know what the market's going to want. And also when you're working on a novel or a comic, like the time it takes to write and draw something and find a publisher, by the time it's coming out, is it going to still be something that, I think if you're working on it because it's in the zeitgeist, are you going to be behind by the time it comes out is something to consider. So I think sometimes trying to think about that and predict things for me is a way to just stop myself from doing the thing. I don't know. So it's like sometimes I think we have to go with our hearts and with our guts.
Very true. Very, very true. We still have a little bit of time left. So I did want to talk about, how important is the artwork in comic writing and comic storytelling? Because that's also another aspect that not a lot of people really consider, that when telling a story, you want to have the artwork work in conjunction with the story. So using Once and Future Queen as an example, how did you guys find the art style that matched the story that you were wanting to tell?
Well, with that one, we were lucky because we'd written 30 issues that Nick had drawn of Amelia Cole. And so we got to know each other. And especially that book, if you look at from the beginning to the end, everything develops. We learned so much from all aspects of creation. So once we got to Once and Future Queen, there was so much trust. Like we knew if we wrote something, Nick was odds are Nick was going to improve it with his storytelling talents, and that he developed some different coloring techniques that looked really beautiful in the book, and he's gone on, he's done a lot more work since then and just continues to get better and better. And for me, I think art is supremely important to comics. It's a visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer, I love writing. There's always been a debate, like if the artist is a superstar in a certain era, if the writer is a star, and there's been debate about that. Me personally, I think it's the artist. I think that, even though I love writers and I'll follow a story, even if the art doesn't appeal to me, but for most of the audience, like you need that art to catch the eye and tell the story. So yeah, I think art's incredibly important. I think the unsung hero of comic creation is the lettering. I think people don't notice lettering if it works, and they only notice it if it doesn't work, if something's off. So yeah, I think just that visual aspect is the most important thing. The script is something that odds are no one's going to read. They're going to read the comic, right? So we're writing the script for our team, and then they're going to bring out the product and the work that people are actually going to see. So to me, yeah, the art's the star, and I'm just a supporting player when I write.
Nice. Well said, DJ. Absolutely well said. And as we wrap up this incredible author interview here on the show, are there any special shout outs you want to give to either your team or people you have networked over the years? And at the end of the day, what do you want people to take away from, all the works you've been a part of and works you have on the back burner?
Yeah, shout out to everybody, every name I've mentioned, look them up. They're all online, my collaborators are all easy to find online and doing great work and sometimes I'm still working with them. Adam and I are working on a project with Robert Love that hopefully, we'll be able to share. And we're working with another artist that I don't really want to talk about right now because we haven't announced it yet. But I think please just seek out comic art. If you have a chance to go to something like Anacon, or there's or any convention in your neck of the woods or a festival, I think it's great to go and just meet artists and see them. I think there's a lot of great work out there. And from my work, I hope that people are entertained and also find some joy, especially if they're having a rough time. I want us to bring some joy to people. And yeah, just be on the lookout. Always be on the lookout and be open to stories, regardless of the medium. I think storytelling, you brought up the AI thing, so I think that storytelling is a wonderful human medium. and it's something we can share with each other, and it's incredibly important.
Absolutely. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we include this incredible interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Want to give a huge thank you to DJ for coming on the show, making his official debut on the Wandering Scribe, and hopefully not the last. Now, DJ, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And where can people buy copies of Once and Future Queen, Laser Joan, and all your other works?
You can find me, I have a website, it's just djkirkbride.com, Instagram at djkirkbride, Blue Sky, I'm DJ Kirkbride, so I keep it pretty simple. You can find me on those platforms, and most of my books can be found at comic shops, or you can go to your local comic shop, and if they don't have it in stock, they usually can order it, or else you can find it at bookshop.org, a lot of them, although a lot of them are gone out of print, so you can find them at conventions or comic shops or back issue stores. And as for Laser Joan, right now, we did the Kickstarter and everybody who ordered it has gotten it. I have copies and the artist has copies. So if you see us at conventions, we might have some. That's the way to get it. And keep an eye out. If I have anything new, I will be mentioning it. I'll be shouting it from the rooftops and maybe bugging you to see if you'll talk to me again. So thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. This is really fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you, DJ. And viewers and listeners, if you would like to see DJ back on the show and talk a little bit more about what goes into making a comic specifically, you know what you have to do. Like this video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to see DJ be a part of a future possible roundtable of comic writers and comic artists, let me know, and I will see if I can make that happen. I know quite a few people that I've met over the years, and I think a roundtable is due. So you know what you have to do. And as always, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below, and share the channel. And make sure to follow DJ on all the social media platforms, which I'll provide in the description of this video. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Wednesday, everybody. And we'll see you all next time. Take care. Have a wonderful day.